Hey everybody, welcome back to another All Things MSP Office Hours. This week we have Michael Lawson from Movebot, and we're going to be talking about why they decided to make another migration tool. Now, I've talked to a lot of MSPs about migrations, and they've really liked the way that Movebot works. And as somebody who's done a lot of migrations, as a former MSP, I look at how Movebot does their migrations, and it's the way I would want them to be done if I was still doing migrations. So without further ado, let me go ahead and bring on Michael. Hey, Michael, how you doing?
Hey, Eric. Good, thanks. How are you?
Not too bad. So, Michael, just to get things rolling, if people don't know you, what is your background and what made you start this?
So I'm Michael Lawson, obviously. I'm the CEO and CTO and one of the co-founders at Couchdrop, which is a company that's built Movebot. I've been building technology solutions for MSPs and for the sort of tech space for probably 10, 15 years, pretty much my entire career. And Movebot first started out as another company, which is still our parent, called Couchdrop, and we built an SFTP server for the cloud. So probably the most boring thing you've ever come across, but equally quite critical in background file processing. And in the process of doing that, we came across migrations and realized that people were actually using Couchdrop and SFTP to get data in, predominantly into Google Drive at that point. And we looked at this and thought, well, like, why would you use SFTP to do that? Surely this is a problem that is actually better solved. So we started tackling the migration space. So Couchdrop and Movebot, we're a Kiwi company. Over the other side of the world from most of our viewers and most of our customers, actually. So we're across in Christchurch, New Zealand, and then we have a lot of customers in the US and a lot of customers in the EU, and a few here. It's one of those odd things where we're kind of global, and we're not really in New Zealand at all, which a lot of local founders and other startups here in the tech space seem to struggle with that idea. But it's kind of fun.
So in terms of, I think it's very interesting that you guys built a technology as Couchdrop and then saw this need for migrations and kind of an ability to implement some of that technology to create a migration tool. What made you look at this and go, this is a great tool for MSPs and service providers who are having to do these migrations all the time?
Well, it made sense right from the get-go. And I mean, I personally know MSPs really well, as I started my career working in MSPs in New Zealand. And I've always been tinkering with technology. So my background is less as a software engineer, and more of sort of a network and a sysadmin, who, purely through interest and tinkering got into software engineering and realized I enjoyed it a lot more. And so I tend to look at problems through a sysadmin or an MSP's point of view to begin with. And then look at ways to solve these problems through technology. And it made sense when we first looked at it, and really just sort of couldn't believe that it was something that wasn't made easier, by the major vendors like Google and Microsoft, who are actually trying to get people into their tools, and B, like it just seems like an obvious problem to solve. MSPs are doing migrations more than anyone else, and I think it goes a little bit beyond just migrations as well, in that data transfer, data reorganization should just be a part of what an MSP is doing for their client. As businesses grow and change, and as technology, of course, grows and changes, you end up with a lot of data sprawl. And so there's always going to be stuff sitting over here in Dropbox, and then some more data sitting on a file server and whatnot. And if it's really hard to move that data around and get it into the right place, then it becomes a risk for the business and becomes a problem for the business as well. And so I think MSPs are best placed to actually help their customers fix that problem. And we played a little bit with Movebot for consumers as well, because my partner, for example, has moved data in and out of Google Drive 3 or 5 times and really struggled with that, copying and pasting files and trying to let the sync agent work. And
right.
But really, we don't understand consumers, but we're all techies here, and so it made sense to really focus on the MSP space for this tool.
Well, and there's a couple of things that make sense there. First of all, those individual, consumer customers, they take a lot to support, and so a lot of times software vendors just aren't prepared for the expense and the time it takes to do that. Where with MSPs, you have that go-between, and then if you look upward into, say, the enterprise space could buy your product and use it effectively because they have technical people. But they have technical people, and so they might be, doing their own solution. So MSPs do make a lot of sense because they do have to, move customers from place to place, which is another thing that I want to kind of mention here as we're getting into this. Is it's not just for files. You guys migrate email as well.
Yeah, we do now. We started with files because email migration we saw them as being a lot easier, and we weren't sort of best placed to do email migrations. So we resisted the urge for a very long time, much to the displeasure of, I think, most of our customers. But we gave in, I think, around October last year and said, all right, and we'll do it. And yeah, ultimately for us, files sort of come first, and that was where we really saw a gap and we really saw issues. But with emails are kind of complementary, and we also do calendars now, and a few of the other things, in the workspace tools, and we'll kind of grow that out as we go, and try and provide a tool which is basically a one-stop shop for moving data around. I would say that our email migration and calendar migration tool set is a little bit different in that we've taken a file spin on it, which is a strange notion to get your head around initially, I think. But if you think about it in terms of, we treat emails as if they are files instead of as if they are specialized emails, and so you can actually put them anywhere. We have quite a number of MSPs starting to use the tool to make backups of emails and stick them on an S3 bucket or an Azure Files bucket, even places like Ignite as a way of taking a snapshot of an inbox or archiving emails in a form that can actually be used. So they're not encrypted. They're, at least in how we store them, they are just email files. You can open them, do what you want with them, re-import them, and of course, the tool can also be used as a straight Outlook to Outlook or Google to Outlook or anything in between migration tool as well. But we treat them a bit differently. They're kind of, in our mindsets, files with a bunch of metadata, and that allows us to do a few things a little bit differently, which I hope is advantageous to the MSPs.
Yeah, that's really interesting. In fact, I could see a use case there for pulling a bunch of mailboxes into some type of cloud storage and then doing some type of e-discovery on that, something that a law firm might need to do, and it might be faster and easier to do it across a file structure than doing it through some of the email tools that are available out there.
It's, believe it or not, yeah, we had exactly that case, or I saw exactly that case a couple of days ago with, I'm not sure what kind of company it was, but effectively they were pulling their emails across into Ignite, which is one of the sort of file storage platforms. Some MSPs might be familiar with it. And they have really good searching tools, really good data organization tools built into Ignite. And so the emails are actually picked up straight away by Ignite as emails, and you can search metadata throughout. And then, because you've got them as individual files or individual messages in Ignite rather than a PST file or some sort of archive, you're actually able to work with them straight off the bat. And also, use that as a reorganization tool as well. So technically, you could take the inbox and just the inbox folder from a user and stick it in or move it into another inbox as a separate label. And so you get, because we treat them as files and we sort of treat the labels and whatnot as a file structure, you're able to use the tool to actually sort of cherry pick folders and labels and move stuff around and reorganize, rather than just saying, hey, I'm going to take the entire inbox and I'm going to migrate it or I'm going to move it. You can be quite selective with that process. And of course, there's deltas. So a nice side effect of the way that we're doing migrations with emails is that you can use the same delta mechanism to deal with changes in a mailbox as you can with files. And that's really quite important. It's surprisingly important because it helps with the transition and the cutover. And while most migrations, there is a hard cutover, it's with Movebot, you can sort of push that back and push it back until your customers are really happy. And you just continuously run deltas to pick up any changes that occur in the source and slowly get your end users across, as opposed to having to wait till the weekend and hope that everything works and sort of ruin your weekend because you're sitting there watching this migration tool tick over and whatnot, waiting for a visual error.
Yeah, that's one of the most important things to me when I'm looking at a migration tool is how much downtime am I going to have migrating a customer from location A to location B? And the ability to have deltas and the ability to do pre-scans even to find problems before you start the migration, I think are two very critical aspects of any migration tool. If you could, go ahead and describe how those two things work with Movebot to help the MSP not have that anxiety-ridden weekend of a migration.
Yeah. I mean, start with not doing it at the weekend is a good, life choice. Especially if you've got kids. But there's kind of, as you said, Eric, there's two main pieces there, and there's actually three stages, or we think about migrations in terms of three stages. You've got the scan and discovery, which really it creates a map of the underlying storage or inbox or migration, and you can do it right across the board. So you could just point it at a file server, and we will map out your file server. You could point it at Google Drive or Google Workspace, and it will do the same thing there. And in the process of doing that, we highlight issues that will occur if you just do a lift and shift migration from the source to the destination. Things like, exceeding the SharePoint file permission recommendations, things like, files that are too big for the destination in certain platforms, and more complicated issues where you've got path length problems and whatnot. We highlight that from the get-go. And after the scan is done, you've sort of got a summary of those issues, but you have a way to actually start cutting the data up and reorganizing it in the destination. And one of the common issues with migrations, especially when you're going between different platforms, is the model the way that these platforms model their data is very different, right? SharePoint and Google Workspace, fundamentally very different tools and how you would structure the data effectively. And then when you get into like a file server to Google Workspace or a file server to SharePoint sort of migration, it's even more nuanced. And so there is a bit of reorganization that needs to happen there when you're moving a larger, more complicated data set across. And the scan tool sort of provides a basis for that, and gives you, recommendations and whatnot, and allows you to, cherry pick and look at data a bit differently. And I think one of the biggest realizations with building that piece inside Movebot was that most businesses don't actually know what their data looks like and where it is and actually how much they have. And certain platforms showcase data volumes a bit differently. And I mean, if you look, it's surprisingly difficult in most of the platforms to just know, okay, in this folder I have, 500 gig of data. In this folder I have 5 terabytes. It's something you'd think is trivial, but it's missing in a lot of the platforms. And so we give you that information. And then the deltas really come last, right? So once you've done your mapping and whatnot, you've split up your migration into projects or into tasks, you push play. And again, like, you shouldn't do this at the weekend. You should do it during the week, and you don't need to tell anybody about it. It's something that can actually just happen in the background. And once you're done and the vast majority of the data has transferred across, you have a look around, and make sure it looks like, it's where it should be. The structure is fine. And then you can start cutting users over and get into this process of running deltas. And the delta is really just a different type of scan. We look at the source and we look at the destination and we see what the difference is, and then we enumerate that. In some cases, customers run deltas for months. So they just schedule it, and it effectively works like a sync mechanism between the source and the destination, and then the customers can or the end users, can come across whenever they need to. So it gives a bit of flexibility. And I think, like, if you're able to think about migrations as less of a big bang project that's done at the weekend, that's incredibly risky, that you have to do a whole heap of planning and preparation for, and more in terms of, hey, I'm moving some data around, I'm reorganizing this, and it's something that I'm just going to do this week, and then once it's done, we'll start, giving users access to it. It's a far less daunting process. Emails, of course, are a little bit more challenging in that regard. I think emails, because you've got to switch the MX records and whatnot, and you've been forced into a bit of a time crunch. A little bit more preparation in terms of that side of things is important, but still the tool from our side works exactly the same. You're effectively transferring data to a new location, and then you're picking up and transferring changes as they occur, and syncing them across. Trying to simplify it, because it is it can be a complex and scary thing, but
yeah. I mean, back in the day, I can say that because I'm old. We used to just do lift and shift, right? There weren't really any tools out there. And so there was disruption to the client's workflow when you had to do a migration. And now what you're saying is you can do these scans that help you set expectations. They help you plan. They help you actually map those changes that might need to happen from source to destination. And then also there's no interruption to the client because you're just migrating data in the background. You have more than enough time, as much time as you need really, to test the new structure in the destination. And then you can cut people over, as required. And those deltas keep everything in sync while you're doing that. The way it used to be, and the way I know a lot of people still do it, it's hurry up, get it done, And then if it doesn't work, you got to do it again. And MoveBot removes all of that uncertainty from the process, which I think is great for an MSP who is doing this on the basis of the less work, the more profit I make. And that's extremely important. Plus, you have the whole customer satisfaction piece of cutting them over in such an organized fashion with no disruption that they can't be anything but happy with that.
Yeah, that's the dream. And I think, yeah, I mean, removing it as something that's scary and requires a lot of planning and a lot of disruption is really important, because ultimately, as an MSP, most of the time you have a tool set and a sort of recommended way of working that your client has bought into. And the faster you can get that client using and working with that tool set across all of their data, generally speaking, the better you are able to support them as a customer, and the better the customer is. And so, I mean, removing any obstacle that you can remove that gets data into the right place, into the right format, in the right way is a really good thing. And traditionally, I think that has been far too difficult and far too haphazard. We hear a lot of horror stories, especially around data being, getting corrupted by sync agents and whatnot, or just not ever appearing there. And that's a big challenge, because the customers may not notice straight away, and they almost always will not notice straight away. And so it'll be 6 months down the line before you realize, actually, we thought that data had come across, and it hasn't. And I think that's, again, for us, is a big part of the tool. It kind of guarantees that the data is there. We surface errors and whatnot in a way which you can actually prioritize and really deal with them. And it should just be an enabler to help MSPs do these data moves more frequently and not sort of worry too much about them. It just becomes a part of operations, and it's another thing that you can offer your customers.
Yeah. And so, speaking of like the safety and security of the data, what are some of the things that MoveBot does, maybe in a little more detail, to ensure the safety and security of the data that you're moving?
There's kind of two questions there. One is the security aspect to it, which is a very, very hot topic at the moment for obvious reasons. But so I'll delay that one. As far as ensuring that the data is there, that comes down to a couple of things. One is validity checks. So, checksums and size checks, and making sure that, hey, the file appears to be in the right place in the destination. We do a lot of that. So as the system is moving data, we are checking it both in terms of, we've pulled the file, we're checking it for validity, we're then pushing the file to the destination, we're checking it for validity, and we're a bit sort of preemptive. So if there's any inkling of a failure anywhere along the line, that results in an immediate sort of retry to really ensure that, hey, there's nothing wrong here, and the file that ends up in the destination will be correct. That's a big part of MoveBot, and one of the more challenging pieces actually is making sure that the file is there, especially when you get into some of the cloud platforms with eventual consistency. So there's sort of a laggard between, hey, we've uploaded the file, you've told us the file is there, but it doesn't appear yet. It's one of the more gnarly challenges, and can be a little bit scary for MSPs as well. If we're sort of saying, hey, the data has been moved, we're confident that it's there, but the indexing in Google Workspaces hasn't caught up yet, or in SharePoint for the permissions is still crunching away. And so the files don't appear, but it's something that we've invested very heavily in, and as I said, like, we're a little bit preemptive as far as, if anything looks a bit suspicious, we will treat that as a failure and retry. And then I think depending on the file type and the size and whatnot, we try and make it so that you never see failures until they are really, we cannot do anything about them. So we will sanitize and change file types and whatnot automatically to try and make sure that, hey, you're not left dealing with, a log file that's got 10,000 files that have failed in it and wondering what on earth you're going to do with that as an MSP. And whether it's actually an issue, we try and get the failure counts down very low and make it easy for you. As far as the security goes, that's a multifaceted thing as well. So the data is all encrypted, and we don't actually store anything. So as data is moving through our platform to the destination, it's totally isolated as a job, and most of the time the data is only stored in memory. If occasionally it's swapped out to sort of buffer space or temporary disk, it's encrypted, of course, when that happens, and then as soon as we've got the file to the destination and it looks valid, it looks like it was successful and all the checks are succeeding, it's gone. It's no longer in our platform, and yeah, we go through a lot of sort of rigorous security checks. We're SOC 2, and we're going for, I think as part of our auditing process, we're going to be going for the ISO standards as well. And we do deal with a lot of healthcare data through HIPAA as well, mostly on the Couchdrop side of things, but the platform is very, very similar in how it operates under the hood, and yeah.
Awesome. Now, I know that you guys work with a lot of MSPs. Have any MSPs given you advice on different things that they needed that you then incorporated into the platform?
Well, emails.
That's a big one.
That's a big one. That's a big one. We get a lot of feedback constantly, which is both is kind of very, very useful, but it's also a double-edged sword. Because one of the things I'm really heavy on is trying to build tools which are very simple to use and to run. And I think it's a common mistake to just add feature, and you end up with a tool that's not very good at doing really anything. So I would say we're a bit more pointed and a bit more aggressive in terms of how we prioritize, which is why we took so long to do emails. But yeah, I think we have a Discord channel. We have now, actually, you can talk with our engineering team through Intercom on our website and the product, and we're very open to feedback and take ideas. And if it's a good idea, it's or you're really in a sticky situation in terms of a particular problem, we are extremely fast to react to that, and will either add a feature to support it, or come up with a workaround, and the guys from customer success and engineering will work with you to get it across the line. So you're not left in the dark. We see quite frequently MSPs and customers coming to us at the last minute because they've got themselves into a sticky situation in terms of they've tried to use something else to do the migration or the data lift. It's Sunday, it hasn't worked, and they've promised the customer that the data is going to be there on Monday. And so, we get the phone call and it's all a bit of a mess. But the team is there and is ready to kind of to lend a hand to MSPs. And we're very, as far as the product roadmap goes, we've started, there's change logs and whatnot, so you can see what's what's happening in sort of the rough direction that we're going in.
Yeah, one of the things, by the way, that I've heard a lot about Movebot is how helpful and how fast you are to react when a migration suddenly isn't going well, or like you described, and this happens more often than we'd like to admit, people who start a migration just trying to copy files or doing it, manually just to get it done because they haven't done a lot of migrations in the past, and they get in trouble. They get to Sunday night and they have a problem. And I've heard from a lot of people that you guys are very, very helpful in those, situations where it's a very critical, very time sensitive issue. Now, obviously, miracles can't happen when you're talking about data and bandwidth. There are physical limitations sometimes, but that you guys do as much as you can to help those MSPs out. Now, I know that you guys talk about how fast your migrations are. And what are some of the things that you guys do maybe behind the scenes to help speed up those migrations?
A lot, and it's a constant battle, I would say, to make it go faster. I mean, if you can think about our business in terms of incentives, right? When you launch a migration with us, we are launching resources to perform that migration, and so we're incentivized to actually make it go as fast as physically possible, because we're using the cloud or cloud platforms to do this, and cloud platforms always charge by the hour. So the faster we can get it through, the more money we make from our side. But on the MSP side, it's exactly the same. So if you can get a large migration that you thought was going to take weeks over the line in a couple of days, that's a win. Like, everyone is going to be happy, and it's always good to sort of under promise and over deliver, rather than obviously the other way around. The challenge with performance comes down to a couple of things. One is rate limiting, which is effectively a mechanism that the cloud platforms use to prevent themselves from getting overloaded. And that is very, very different between each platform. How it works in SharePoint is totally different to how it works in Google Workspace, and the other platforms are much the same as well. And so there's a lot of logic and a lot of work in place to optimize how we interact with these APIs in a way that is going to be extremely performant. And then what we effectively try and do is we just hammer them until they tell us to back off. And so you launch a migration, we're going to push as hard as we can. And then they're going to start telling us, hey, you're hitting us too hard. And so we will effectively back off with that rate limiting. But it's something that's, is constantly being worked on and improved, and it's always changing, and it changes between the regions and whatnot. But for us, like, we are heavily incentivized and pushing to try and get the data through as fast as possible, because it's a win-win for everyone. And there's a lot of smarts in the platform, and a lot of smarts coming. We have a notion of, worker nodes, which are an abstract concept in the platform, where you can kind of tell us, okay, how much resource to put in, and you can tune and tweak stuff. And we give you, there's a piece of the platform called the Performance Advisor, which has a lot of pretty graphs, and it will kind of give you a recommendation or tell you effectively what we're seeing that's happening, or that is a limiting factor in that migration. And there's a lot of work coming in that area. So ideally, and this is a very trusting thing, but ideally we just magically make it work as fast as possible. and you don't, as an MSP, have to worry about any of the mechanics of that. The tricky part is with sort of giving us that control and removing those sort of dials from the platform is that if it's not working, if it's crawling and you're up against a time, a time crunch, it's nice to have some dials to play with. And so I'm not sure how removing all the dials and automatically optimizing the platform will be received, because having visibility and knowing, okay, this particular task is crawling at the moment because Google has a limitation here, and this type of data is heavily impacted by that. Having that information and being able to sort of act on it is really useful. So we'll have to kind of tread the line between magic and I'm not going to say the magic word at the moment because I think it's a bit overused, and it's certainly not that. I can tell you that for with absolute certainty. But sometimes that magic is not the best thing, and having the ability to see what's going on and whatnot is useful.
Well, and that's something that we haven't talked about. We haven't talked about the visibility that you guys give an MSP into a migration in process. And that's one of the things I really like because, clients can get impatient, right? And as an MSP, if you're constantly, if you're making sure that things are working smoothly, you're going to want to be checking on things from time to time. And the dashboards that you guys provide that type of information in some very detailed ways of letting clients know, okay, this is where we are with the migration, and for your technicians to be able to check on the status of a migration, to know, kind of where it's at and how much longer it has to go.
Yeah. Oh, in all honesty, a lot of that stuff is just because we eat our own dog food, right? Like we get the call, and the customer success team sees pretty much exactly what you as an MSP see. And so they're looking at it going, well, I don't know what's going on with this migration. And that becomes a problem.
Right.
So we've kind of, there is a lot of information there, and I hope it's useful to MSPs, and we are again sort of treading a line between what is useful for us, what is useful for the MSP, and what is really fast to get feedback from. Because ultimately, we don't want you to, as a user of Movebot, to have to understand the internals of Movebot. Like that defeats the purpose,
Right.
But we do want you to know what's going on with the migration when things are going wrong. So there's a lot of effort put into that side of things, and showing you as the process is going through what stage it's at, what files we're operating on, if there's limitations, there's failures happening, you see that there, and we'll, as the tool grows and we deal with different data types and different scenarios, we'll continue to try and thread that line and give MSPs the information that they need. You said earlier we were talking about consumers, and it's quite humbling to try and build software for consumers.
Yes.
It really forces you to go back and think, okay, well, is this flag or this particular detail really necessary? Can I remove it? And so that's a big part of the process that we use here to engineer product is, our core customers are MSPs and our techies working in large companies. But it should be possible for someone who is not tech savvy to run a migration with our tool. And yeah, that's not easy. That's you've got a constant battle between, hey, can my partner who's an accountant use this? Can my grandmother use it? But if I'm an MSP and I'm running a migration with 5,000 users and 20 terabytes of data, am I getting enough information to actually be able to set the right expectations with my customer who's, calling me every 5 minutes, wondering where my data is? So it's a thin line to sort of work with, and it's fun.
Yeah.
I think it's a good challenge.
Yeah. Developing software for people who haven't done it, right, can be fun because there's so many different things that you can do. Now, this question, I understand if you can't provide a lot of detail because I'm going to ask you for, kind of a case study or use case. But what is one of your favorite, maybe complex or just an interesting migration that Movebot has been used for in the past?
Good question. I like speed and big data. So I think the record as far as mass goes and performance was we did a migration for a media company, which was 1.2 petabytes out of Google into another platform. And we were placing bets with the partner involved and the customer on how fast it was, because it was quick. And we had to tweak it a bit, but we actually got, I think it was 1.2, 1.3 petabytes done in just under 6 weeks.
Wow.
Which is super cool. And not what I would expect from the platform, right? So if you've got a SharePoint tenant with 1.2 petabytes in it, don't expect it to take 6 weeks, please. It probably won't. But that's kind of what we're going for, right? Is that, hey, this is really fast, and for the customer, it was very easy. Right.
And those are notoriously difficult files too. I mean, video files, graphic files, they don't compress well because they're already compressed, and they just, they're
large. They're large, and there's all sorts of complexities with large files that really make it kind of nasty. And I think from memory, it wasn't only large files, so it was a good distribution between sort of normal business operations and bigger media files, because it was a big company. And that, it's being able to move that sort of volume of data without the customer really being impacted at all, and sort of coming under their expectations or well over their expectations as far as time goes, is really neat. And I mean, I think they had planned for a year to run that. Obviously, there's we hear a lot of horror stories and whatnot, and there's, in terms of organizational complexity, I think this migration was pretty straightforward. But generally speaking, you sort of get, it's a lot easier than it traditionally has been, and than people expect, right? It's you can really sort of sit back and not worry too much about it, and it doesn't have to be something that's so complicated, and such an impediment that it just gets pushed back and back and back, and it's something you can't just do. Yeah.
Well, and that example should give everybody the satisfaction of knowing that their migration is probably going to take less than 6 weeks.
Oh yeah, I would hope so. I think if it's taking 6 weeks, it's gotta have a good reason for that. Of course, your customer, getting your customer to start working in a new environment might take more than 6 weeks. But true. The data move certainly shouldn't. Yeah,
so just to give people an idea, because 1.3 petabytes is almost so large that it's hard to do the math and hard to envision that much data. For, say, let's just say around 2 terabytes, what is the average amount of time that it might take? What's the expectation for migrating 2 terabytes of data?
The general rule for us for a single task, if it's less than one gig a minute and there's 1,400 minutes in a day, it's not performing. So 2 terabytes a day, 2 days, is sort of our expectation, and that's assuming normal data,
Right.
right? And so normal business data spread across a large group of users, and then if you're pushing on 4 days and still running, there's a problem. Something is not going right. There's unusual levels of rate limiting, or the structure is kind of flawed, and you're running up against a brick wall. Generally, we're sort of really happy if we're getting 3, 4, 5 terabytes a day from a migration. That's across all the platforms. That's sort of a sweet spot. Obviously, there are limitations and nuances with the different platforms,
Right.
that mean it's not horrendously, it's not easy to predict unless you know a lot about the data structure and whatnot. But as a ballpark for a file migration, you're looking at sort of 1-2 terabytes a day minimum, and then upwards is pretty normal.
Awesome. And I think those are very respectable numbers. I mean, I that to me seems like very good speeds for migrating that amount of data. And I think almost every customer would have to be happy with, migration speeds like that. So
yeah, I think so. Of course, we'd always like it faster. But.
Well, everybody would like it faster, but there are limiting factors, all over the place. So what does the future look like for Movebot? What's on the horizon? What's next?
We are right now. We're really invested in sort of perfecting calendars and a few of the other metadata types that have come with emails. So there's a huge focus on that right now. But we have, I think around a month ago, we released what we're calling tasks, and sort of we took a stab at a first notion of a snapshotting or a backup component. In Movebot. And it's a bit of an experiment we're playing with. I think backups for us come in a couple of different flavors. In the market come in a couple of different flavors. One is you want a continuous backup of something, and you want there to be versions and delta trails, and you want to be able to restore very quickly. That we're probably not going to do. I don't see that as part of a normal data lifecycle. That is a specialized backup thing, and there's a lot of tools that do a really good job of that. But where we can help is, hey, I want to take a snapshot every month or every week or every day of this data, and I want to take it and put it in S3 or in Azure, and it needs to be in a format that I can actually use. And so we've done that, and we're going to be building out a bit of functionality around that sort of snapshotting of data, and a few other data lifecycle things as well. So providing you with a way to actually clean up data, and so identify, okay, I've got in SharePoint, I've got a lot of old data. It's causing bloat. There's a lot of duplication. I would like something that runs every day and deletes data that hasn't been touched in 7 years. Or deletes media files that haven't been touched in a couple of years and are bigger than X and are duplicated. And so, we can at that point help you with the data move, but also help you with the sort of taking the trash out and making sure that the data is actually, the working data set is clean and is well structured and it's not costing a fortune. And so that comes down to, okay, taking a snapshot, being able to move the data to somewhere automatically that is going to cost a lot less and is going to make sense as an archive, and doing this in the background so that it doesn't become a project. It's just something which is possible. And one of the things that some of the MSPs may be familiar with, block storage and Amazon S3. One of the beautiful things about S3 is the lifecycle rules that you're able to apply to data sets. They don't do some of the cooler stuff that we're looking at doing, but taking that same idea, whereas you can configure a lifecycle rule in Movebot and say, hey, once data reaches this sort of or meets these conditions, do something with it, move it to another place. Or remove it and free up that space entirely. And so, that's kind of where we're headed at the moment, until someone has a better idea. So,
well, that sounds pretty exciting, and it sounds like something that you could help MSPs further monetize as an additional recurring service to their clients rather than just the one-time migration. So I think that's a great add for the MSPs as well. So, Michael, thank you so much for providing kind of this deep dive into why you guys developed a migration tool, how it works, some of the aspects of it that really help it be different from some of the competition out there. And if anybody's out there, I guess a couple of details we didn't cover. And I know we don't want to talk exactly what pricing is, but you do price by the amount of storage moved, right?
Yeah, we do. So we don't charge for users or anything like that. It's basically simple flat pricing based on the data that's moved when it's moved. There's public rates on the website. It's 39 cents a gig. MSPs, we have a partner program which I would encourage MSPs to join. There's no cost with that. You get a significant discount as part of the partner program, and we give you sort of our migration guarantee, which is effectively, we will back it if anything goes wrong. We will deal with it. We will work with you to resolve it, and you get more direct access to our team as support, and you get sort of a hotline you can call when stuff is really on fire, and it'll wake appropriate people up if necessary. But I think that was one of the big things with migrations. The tools that we initially saw when we started building Movebot in the market were extremely expensive, and just the barrier to entry for a lot of them was too high, which conversely means MSPs or businesses are just not going to do them. They're going to try and find a way around doing this migration project, which is not really good for anybody, right? It's not good for the cloud vendors. It's not good for the MSPs. It's certainly not good for the customers. So we try and price the migrations in a way that makes sense. And that's the same across the board. So emails, it's exactly the same. It's volume based. It's not per user pricing. It's not per tenant or anything like that. And it's just simple. Made to be simple. It's kind of the idea.
Great. So easy to use, easy to do migrations, and easy to quote and sell. I think all of those things make it a great tool for the MSP. Michael, thank you so much for doing this today. Thank you for being a supporter of the All Things MSP community, and can't wait to see what you guys have coming up next.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. It's good to chat.